Next up, we are going to learn how to paint a loose watercolor watermelon. And the watermelon, the techniques we use are very similar to the techniques we used to create our popsicles. So let's get started. Now, before we get started painting, I want to talk about color a little bit. I have some Opera Pink here from Daniel Smith. And Opera Pink is a fun color if you want to use for watermelon, but for me it's a little too bright neon kind of pink, and so to get the kind of color that I really want, I'm gonna mix Opera Pink with just a little bit of yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is this darker yellow color over here that I have. So I'm gonna mix just a little bit of yellow ochre in with my Opera Pink. I don't want it to be too corally. I've mixed probably a little bit too much. Yeah, it's a little too corally. So I'm gonna mix a little more Opera Pink. I want it to be like a nice melony kind of color. There, just like that. Perfect. So with some of these fruits, sometimes in order to get the exact color that I want, I have to do my own mixing, which is why I like to have these palettes and why I like to test my colors on scratch paper beforehand. So now I'm just basically creating a nice little bank of this color so I don't have to go back and mix it together every time. Okay, so with watermelon, like I said, we're going to be using very similar technique as the popsicle. So first, I'm gonna paint a watermelon like it's facing down, like it's a slice of watermelon that's facing down. So I should specify this particular tutorial is just for a watermelon that's like a slice of watermelon that's facing down. So I'm gonna paint this triangle because I feel like watermelon often come in triangles, and I'm just using water. I'm not having a very sharp point to this triangle. It's pretty smooth. And just in general, this watermelon is not an exact triangle. We're going for loose styles here, loose doodles that are just fun ways to warm up and enjoy summer with your watercolor. So I'm making sure to get down a good layer of water here. And then I'm gonna take this melon color that I created, and this time I'm not trying to be as careful about going around the edges because it doesn't need to be super shaded. I'm just painting along. I still want to leave some white space just for that nice watercolor effect. But the key here is I'm not going to go up to the very top of this triangle just yet. And that's because we're going to paint in the outside, the green part of the watercolor of the watermelon in just a second. But the tricky part with painting watermelon is pink and green as colors do not blend well together. And let me show you what I mean after I finish shading this. So I'm with my brush, I'm just using the tapping method again to add in some of this darker watermelon in some places, and using the tapping method to make sure that I don't have just like a straight wash, because that's not what I'm looking for when I paint these loose doodles with watercolor. I want them to look like watercolor, like they have this cool texture. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna show you what happens when you mix pink and green together. First, I'm gonna create a little bit more of this melon color that I created before with Opera Pink and yellow ochre. So here's my melon, and then I'm gonna take some of this Hooker's green when you mix pink with green, you kind of get this gross brown color, which is not appetizing. And that's because red and green are complementary colors, which means they're opposite each other on the color wheel, which means They do not go well together. So because we know that about pink and green, but I still want to have like a nice blend, because these are still loose watercolor doodles, right? I still want to have like a nice blend of colors in my doodle. I'm just gonna leave a layer of clear, clean water at the top that's still wet. And now that I've painted most of the body of my watermelon, I'm gonna take some pretty watery Hooker's green. Not like so watery that it's transparent, but just like pretty wet Hooker's green. And along the top, I'm only gonna have like the tip of my paintbrush be skimming along the top and still be painting on the dry paper on top of that layer of wet. So it's like I want to leave that layer of white where you can see the paper. I want to leave that there. And so when I initially drew the triangle for the watermelon, it's like I didn't, the water wasn't supposed to capture what the outside of the watermelon, the green part of the watermelon, is supposed to be. I'm painting that on top so that the bottom of the green part is the top of the initial outline of the watermelon that we drew, that we painted with water, so that I still have this layer of white. And part of that is, if you look at watermelon, there is like a layer of colorless melon, basically, that connects the green part of the watermelon with the actual fruit. And so in that way, we're mimicking what exists in real life. But in terms of what it means for us as artists, we're doing that also, so that we try to avoid mixing green and pink as much as possible, because we know that they do not mix well together. So after I've put down my layer of green, I'm just gonna go back and do the tapping method again to mix some of these together and create those cool watercolor blends that I really like. And the next step here is to add some seeds. So we're gonna wait for it to dry, and then we're gonna add some black seeds. Now that our watermelon is dry, I'm gonna take my size 0 brush, and I'm just gonna get some black paint. If you don't have black paint, an alternative is if you have a nice black pen. You could also draw on the seeds that way. But I'm just going to draw in a few of these seed-like things in the watermelon. Not very many. I like to go in odd numbers, so I'm probably gonna go for 5. And we're just putting them randomly in different sizes, scattered on the watermelon. And then maybe one down here. I'm gonna do 7, I lied. Sometimes I eyeball it and just decide if something might need a little bit more. So again, this is a loose watermelon. We're not really going for, we're mostly going for like cute, quirky, illustration-y kind of style here. And that's it. That's our watermelon. It was pretty simple, with using the wet on wet technique to blend in these colors over here to get this kind of cool watercolor texture, and then using the wet on dry technique to paint our seeds on top of it. So practice your watermelon.